Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for a very special presentation. I am Barbara Henry. I'm the Director of Donor Relations here at Oglethorpe and also a member of the Rikard Lecture Planning Committee. On behalf of my fellow committee members, we welcome you to the Spring Rikard Lecture. We are pleased to have students from the Hammock School of Business, faculty, staff, alumni, and other members of the Oglethorpe community joining us today, as well as our distinguished speaker. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Lynn Goody, the Mack A. Rikard Chair of Business and Economics in the Hammock School of Business and the Chair of the Rikard Lecture Planning Committee. Dr. Goody will introduce today's speaker and members of our student panel and share more about the format for today's event. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Barb. And also, I would like to welcome everyone to the Spring Rikard Lecture. This is our first virtual lecture. As Barb said, I am Lynn Goody, the Mack A. Rikard Chair of Business and Economics, and today we have a very special guest. Ms. Shan Cooper, described as an influential Georgian and a respected business leader. Her educational background, religion, bio, and business, and career experiences, recycling, military planes, and economic development, likely provides a connection to all of us. The Rikard Lecture Series, established in 1991, is named after Mack A. Rikard, an Oglethorpe alumnus, Athletic Hall of Fame member, and Trustee Emeritus. Mr. Rikard, who passed away in 1996, was the former president of Allied Products Company and a supporter of Oglethorpe athletics and student scholarship. At this time, I would also like to acknowledge, as Barb did, the members of the Rikard Lecture Planning Committee, Dr. Peter Cower, Dr. Seema Shokande, and of course, Barb Henry. With me is a panel of 3 students prepped and ready to ask Shan a series of insightful questions. Before introducing our guest, I would like to ask our students to introduce themselves. Andy, would you like to start?
Yes. My name is Andy Kez. I am a sophomore here at Oglethorpe University. I am majoring in communications and public relations, and I am double minoring in nonprofit management and urban leadership. I'm originally from Decatur, Georgia, and I am passionate about nonprofit management and hope to one day pursue that as a job career after graduation.
Hi, I am Tyson Quander. I am a senior business administration major with the minor in theater, and I am originally from Douglasville, Georgia. And after graduation, I plan to attend Duke University to get my master in studies.
Hello, everyone. Really excited about today's lecture. My name is Lola, and I am currently a senior, and I am pursuing a double major in politics and economics. I've had the opportunity to serve on different leadership roles at Oglethorpe University. I'm currently senior senator and also the president of Epsilon Iota Psi Sorority Incorporated. In 2019, I've had the opportunity to intern on Capitol Hill, and last year I got the opportunity to study abroad at the University of Oxford. And after graduation, I will be interning at JP Morgan as a summer analyst. I'm very passionate about economic development and women empowerment, so I'm very excited to learn about more what Ms. Shan Cooper is doing and how I can apply that in my personal life and also in my career.
Thank you, and thank you to our student panelists. Shan Cooper is the Executive Director of the Atlanta Committee for Progress. The ACP, founded in 2003, is focused on providing leadership on key issues facing the city of Atlanta and includes more than 40 CEOs, university presidents, and civic leaders who offer their expertise and service to Atlanta and its future development. Shan is the former Chief Transformation Officer of WestRock, and prior to joining WestRock, served as Vice President and General Manager of Lockheed Martin Aeronautics Company. As GM, she was responsible for the 6,000 employees behind the design, production, and maintenance of military aircraft for the US and countries around the world. Shan has received too many awards to list them all, but include Georgia Trend Magazine's Most Respected Business Leader and Most Influential Georgian. and one of Black Enterprise Magazine's most powerful executives in corporate America. Shan serves on several boards, including Georgia Power Company, Grady Health System, Girl Scouts of Greater Atlanta, Zoo Atlanta, and the Board of Trustees at both Emory University and the Woodruff Art Center. Shan earned a bachelor's degree in biology and religion from Emory University and an MBA from the Goizueta Business School of Emory University. For the next 20 to 25 minutes, our panelists will ask Shan a series of questions followed by Q&A with the audience. In fact, I would suggest the audience can type in their questions anytime during the talk, and we will get to them towards the end. It is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Shan Cooper. Andy won the coin toss backstage, so she will ask the first question. Andy?
Yes. So, Ms. Cooper, a major lesson we learned in my nonprofit communications class with Dr. Shakande this semester is the importance of a mission statement. What is the core mission of Atlanta Commission for Progress? And do you expect this statement to change and grow as our city progresses over time?
Thanks, Andy. First of all, let me say it's a pleasure and an honor to be with the Oglethorpe family this afternoon. I've been excited about this for a week, so thanks for having me today. And so, Andy, the mission of Atlanta Committee for Progress is pretty simple. Our objective and our goal is to ensure quality of life for the residents of the city of Atlanta. That takes a look at economic development. It takes a look at ensuring that as the city prospers, that we all have an opportunity to participate in the prosperity of the city. And so I don't expect that mission to change. If anything, we're giving greater focus to quality of life issues and issues around equity. And some people would be surprised by that because, we're the business community, right, predominantly. But we just believe that business and government and just everyday citizens have a role to play to ensuring that our environment and our communities are great places to live.
Ms. Cooper, as someone who is very passionate about women empowerment and economic development, like I said earlier, I really like that the mission of ACP highlights the importance of inclusion as part of the mission statement. And I was just wondering, can you please talk more about some of the programs that you do to empower women in the city of Atlanta?
Absolutely. So let me start by saying that I should be at the beach right now, guys. So I retired and had 4 weeks at the beach, but I happened to come back to do this role at ACP, and let me tell you why. In my studies, like many of you as students and faculty, I like data. You didn't grow up in a place like Lockheed Martin and not be comfortable with data and understand what the data tells us. And I happened to be reading a report that the ACP board had commissioned McKinsey consultant to do for us. We really wanted to understand how did Atlanta compare to other cities of our size and scope as related to economic mobility. And what we learned was very surprising to us. We learned that, unfortunately, of the 40 to 50 cities that McKinsey studied, we were always close to the bottom, if not the absolute last city. That didn't make us feel comfortable. And so we recognized that as a business community, we do have a role to play. And so we carefully sat down and thought through what is it that we can do to impact the quality of life for citizens. To your point, Lola, being very inclusive in the process. We recognized head on that our most impoverished part of the city was the west side of Atlanta. So we put together, hired the right folks, brought in the right teams, the experts to help us understand what do we have to do to change the economic situation of that community. And so we have a 15-year strategy and a 15-year plan, and it involves some very important things. You talked earlier about women empowerment. Well, for women to be empowered and to do the things that I've had the opportunity to do and others will do that have done before me, it starts with, I think, with a solid education. So what did our K through 12 education system look like here in the city? So great partnership with Atlanta Public Schools. Great looking around and looking at some of our nonprofit organizations, Andy, so I'm glad you're going to take on that work. And for me personally, I happen to really enjoy getting involved in things that are important to girls, particularly around STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But for the ACP, we were very focused on, again, quality of life and equity. And what we recognized, what we had that could change the narrative for Atlanta is that we have living wage jobs. So we looked around our table and said, okay, who's hiring over the next 3 to 5 years? There are about 6 companies who felt very strongly about this and said, look, we'll raise our hands. We'll start this process and work with you, Shan. We found a partner because, again, we're not the experts in education. We're business leaders. So our partner in this work was Atlanta Technical College. We specifically chose a technical college because it's set in a location that was right in the most impoverished areas of the city. And we wanted to make this easy access. And so workforce development became our mantra. But with that, what we learned, and I learned a lot in that process, is that when we talk about going in the community and rolling up our sleeves and working with the most vulnerable, there's a lot more investing in time we had to put into that process. And we're still doing that today. And so we believe that, again, what we could do was first think about living wage jobs. That's the quickest way to get communities out of poverty. But what brought me from the beach to this role was hearing the statistic that if you are a child born in the city of Atlanta, you have a 4.8% chance of getting out of poverty if something is not intentionally done to change your life. It was that one data point that caused me to come out of retirement, to take on this role. And so as the ACP, and I share that statistic, right? Because I want all of our children to have an opportunity to have a great career like you guys are going to have, or to have access to a wonderful education like you've gotten here at Oglethorpe. And so we begin to step back and say, we've got to build a pipeline, not just starting here today on workforce development, but we've got to help students get ready to understand what it means to work in a corporate setting, what it means to work in a nonprofit setting. You know, can we be role models? Can we be mentors for that? Can our staff and our teams be mentors for that? And so we are, I'll tell you, I try to do as little work as possible. So I try to lean on experts to help me get the work done. And we've been very fortunate to have great nonprofit partners who come in and help us with the students in terms of, and students being broad. Not most of them are not as young as you are. Some of them are starting a second career. They just want to be reskilled and upskilled. So we can help with that. But at the end of the day, it's getting them from the education experience into the living wage job. And that to me is what's going to be the foundation for changing people's lives. But it's more than that, right? It's more than just the job. It's also the community, affordable housing, right? It's also having access to healthcare. It's also being in a safe community. So crime matters. And so we've taken a holistic strategic look at what we can do as ACP, recognizing that we're not expert in everything. And sometimes it's just our investing in an organization who does this work well, but being real intentional, as I talked about, being intentional about how we can change and impact people's lives in a positive way. Does that help, Lola? Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Welcome. You're welcome.
So you mentioned that equity and inclusion are really kind of the forefront of ACP in creating progress. Atlanta is one of the most diverse cities in the Southeast and in the nation. How do you think that organizations and businesses within the city can use this diversity to increase inclusion policies? And how do these policies positively impact these businesses?
Wonderful. I'm so glad you brought that up because diversity and inclusion is very important to us, and equity, right? It's all three working together and really understanding kind of what that means. And so for us as the business community, we think about our workforce, right? The talent we're going to need to be able to deliver our products and services to our customers. But we also recognize that if we're not open in terms of creating the environment where once we're able to hire this diverse talent, people want to come into an organization feeling like they belong, right? Feeling that they're supported, that they're going to be invested in and what have you. And so we constantly will take a look at our policies and how we're doing things. And we actually learn from each other. Some people might think, well, you know, Delta has all the answers, but I'll tell you, Ed Baskin is very quick to say, hey, what are you doing over there at Home Depot, Craig? Or what are you doing over there, Paul, at Georgia Power? Because we're learning from each other. And what I often tell people is that during this time, particularly in this season in our country, and you all are seeing it, right? You saw the social unrest that happened in our city last year. You're hearing what's happening in the news, what's happening broader. And so what I've been encouraging my board, the folks I get to work with, for the boards I serve on, is that this is a time that we've got to be talking about the things that probably in the past has made us uncomfortable, right? We got to be talking about race. We got to be talking about the inequities that exist, right? And acknowledging that. And because we can't move forward if we don't, we can't move forward together collectively if we don't understand the history, right? And if we're not talking about those things. And so I've been telling people we got to talk about it, but it's also a time of grace, right? Because we're not always going to say it the right way, right? We're always going to ask our question, the politically correct way, but it's a time for us to give each other grace so we can at least have those hard conversations. And so looking at our policies, Andy, one of the things I'll tell you that we looked at that many of the companies have undertaken is looking at their hiring practices, right? Because I'll speak from a Lockheed Martin perspective. We had real clear hiring rules at Lockheed Martin because we were national defense. And so our rules had more to do around security, right? Securing our nation and things like that. But many of our companies have taken a step back to say, what's really needed in the job? Is a 4-year degree really needed to get that work done? Or will a 2-year degree, or do I need someone needs to have a degree at all? Is there an opportunity for me to teach that person, right? So looking at our hiring practice, but also looking at our promotion practices also within the organization, right? Are there barriers that we put in place, even unconsciously, right? Not intentionally, that keep people from growing, particularly, again, we focus heavily on women and minorities, or people of color, that keep people from being able to advance in our organizations. We're looking at our board of directors makeup. And so it starts first, as we say, with a self-assessment. So the company's looking at their sales, how are they behaving, right? What's happening internally? A lot of discussions went on with employees inside of our companies. And so we've learned a lot this past year. And it wasn't a problem that we knew existed before, but I think last year's, the unrest that happened really brought things to a new light and a new perspective for us. But you got to have, what's important is that we have an environment where our employees can speak out and talk about the things that they either don't like or they're uncomfortable with. That becomes really important, that in culture, that environment where people feel like they belong. It's really important. So lots of, I would say, self-assessment, best practice sharing, who's doing what better, and really being willing to make the changes.
It's so interesting that you said self-assessment, because actually in my urban leadership class that I'm taking right now, it's called Leading and Managing Social Change. We actually had to do an assignment where we looked at a nonprofit or a business and basically self-assessed their ability to include diversity and equity within their organization. So I think that's a really great thing that you're doing at ACP for sure.
Well, thank you, Andy. I appreciate it. So I get an A?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I was looking at the ACP website, and I also noticed that you have a couple policies that you're working on towards transportation. And we talked a little bit before this seminar about transportation. And as a daily driver and MARTA user, I think many Atlantans like myself would agree that one of the most serious problems in our city is transportation. What initiatives has ACP established that focus on the improvement of infrastructure and transportation?
Right. So one of the things, great question, Andy. So one of the things that we're working on now, you guys have heard of this thing called the T-Splost, right? That's where you get approval for taxing things. And so Atlanta's renewal of its T-Splost is coming up in a couple of years. And so we'll be on the front end supporting the mayor's strategy in terms of being able to communicate to voters why that's so important, right? We're partners, great partners with MARTA. And as MARTA has gone off to think about the land, the property that they own, we're saying to them, gosh, it would be great as we all look at affordable housing, if your land and your locations can be used for affordable housing. Because what people need more than anything is to be able to get to the job, right? To get to the career opportunity. And that's a challenge for many of the citizens here in Atlanta. And so partnering with MARTA to say, okay, if you look at your long range plan and the land that you own, what can we do there, right? What can we do to ensure that you're leveraging your land for affordable housing? At the same time, the city of Atlanta also owns a lot of vacant land, as well as the Atlanta Housing Authority. So we have brought the entities together. Anybody who has what I would say, an affordable housing mission. So take the Beltline, for example. Many people don't know this because we don't talk about ourselves much, but the initial investment to get the Beltline kicked off came from the ACP. We thought it was a valuable thing to do for the city in terms of bringing us together, right? And also it's good for economic development. But we want to ensure that all of us, if we choose to live for the Beltline, that we can afford to do that, right? So the Beltline is not only a way of connecting the city and bringing us together, but it's also an economic driver for the city. But again, we want everybody participating in that process. And so between the Beltline and the land that they own and the city and Atlanta Housing, we're looking at how do we put affordable housing in places where there's connectivity to public transportation. And we make it easy for our citizens to be able to get to the job. And so, and I'll tell you, it's a very hard process because MARTA has a lot of rules and regulations they have to follow. The good news is that we've got leadership at MARTA who's open to new and trying different things and thinking outside the box about how we solve these issues. But it's going to be a long-term proposition. And so just know that ACP, we won't set the strategy for MARTA, but we will try to influence and help and support where we can. And like I said, the good news is that they too understand the need for affordable housing. And so when you see them in the future, you see, homes and apartments and things coming up around MARTA, know that they partnered to say, again, we want to give people, again, quality community, but also the ability to have access to opportunities.
That's great. I had no idea that ACP was involved with the Beltline.
There's a lot that people don't know about us, but we like that because the mayor needs to be out front, and she sets the vision. And previously it was Mayor Reed set the vision, and so on and so forth. And so the mayor sets the vision, and then we as ACP just determine how can we help support. And so a lot of times that requires us to do that. So we do three things: we convene experts when we have to, we engage where we have to, with our own personal kind of brand and what we need to do, and then we invest. And so depending on what the project the mayor needs to get done, but we just want to be there to help where we can.
That's really good. That sounds really good, Ms. Cooper. And so I have a two-part question. And I'm very sure, just like me, you're very tired of the COVID-19 pandemic, tired of being stuck at home. Unfortunately, I can't be with my friends during my last semester, but we're happy there's so much good news about the vaccine. So hopefully, things will get better as the months go on. So my question, to what extent did the ACP get involved in helping the city deal with the COVID-19 pandemic? And if you can just talk more about what you learned during the pandemic and what you plan to take with you to your personal life and to your career.
Right. So you probably, Lola, now I'm old. I warned you earlier, so you're probably going to have to give me that question again. But let me talk about my personal learnings, and we'll come back to the first question, okay?
No problem.
The personal learning for me is that I've always been one to give back to the community, but it's always been easier for me just to write the check. And you all will be there one day where you're just able to write a check and then just say, I've given, I'm done. But it requires so much more than that. And so what the pandemic has shown for me is that you still want to write the check, right? But I've got to personally be involved. I got to personally be playing a role. And so I spent a lot of my time pre-pandemic at Atlanta Technical College, talking with the students, engaging with the students, understanding what's important, mentoring, coaching, career coaching. And not only do I do it with the students, I do that with the students at ATC. I also do it with some of the leaders in the various companies that are represented on ACP. And that becomes important. So that's an area that I can give back. I also serve on several important boards here in the city, the Girl Scouts, for example, right? Imagine that little Girl Scout, who can't make that cookie sale because of COVID, right? Or who can't be at the camp like she would have enjoyed in the past and things like that. And so it's important to me that we were reaching out, engaging with the scouts, giving them, because what I worry about is the mental state of our youth, you all included, right? You've been away from your friends. I just heard you talk about not being able to, your last semester, right? Your senior, right? How important it is. And I remember my senior year in college and how important that was to me. And so giving an outlet to our youth being there again to give you the rah-rah speech to keep you going. And so I spend a lot of my time, though I couldn't be with people, a lot of Zoom discussions, a lot of phone call discussions, checking in. Prior to the pandemic, I was actually out in community, particularly on the West Side, and actually working some community projects. It doesn't hurt to sign up for Habitat for Humanity, right? But being over there with the folks at Grove Park, for example, the day that we were cutting, doing the groundbreaking for the new school that they were going to get, that school, that community hadn't had a new school, since the 1960s. I mean, so doing these wonderful things, just being in community, talking to people, understanding the need, and then picking up and doing what you can. These challenges are significant, and it's going to take more than just one organization or one entity. One of the fun things I like to do is I like to fundraise, and so I had a chance to lead a fundraising called Beloved, the Beloved Benefit for Arthur Blank and Dan Cathy, where we raised $5.2 million that went back into the West Side community, back directly to their nonprofits, where we said, look, take this money, expand your mission, do what you got to do, but let's go build real community, the beloved community. And so things like that. Got a new project I'm working on the east side of town, similar thing. We're going to build an outreach center because communities need to be fed. I've learned more this past year about food insecurity. My team led the work when the COVID-19 hit. Here in Atlanta, you all probably saw the governor asked the mayor to lead the response for the homeless community. Well, she asked me, and I was very privileged, to help her lead the response to the homeless community here in Atlanta. Because Atlanta, across the state, we've got the largest number of homeless people in our community here. And so being able to negotiate and stand up 2 hotels that were given to us pro bono, because again, the homeless community, should they have become infected with COVID, needed a place to be, right? They didn't have homes to go to. And so that partnership connected with Grady, who would service someone who actually tested positive, and then they're having a place to go and rest. And so, but also clothing. What we quickly learned and quickly recognized, yes, we've got a place for the homeless community to go, but they need clothing. And the number one thing that I had to go out and get was underwear. I mean, how often do we forget underwear, right? People need underwear as well. And I'm talking about underwear at the school. Forgive me, Nick, forgive me. But anyway, these are the basic things that really become important. And so I had a chance to partner with Walmart, call Walmart up and said, look, I need for the homeless community here in Atlanta. And they delivered. And so it's not the big muscle things you have to do, but all of us can do something and give back. And so that's what I've been doing. But it opened my eyes even more so to the inequities that existed, right? And so I'm determined that we're going to fix that. Right? It won't be done tomorrow, but we're going to stay focused and get that fixed. Now back to your first question. That was my personal learning. So thank you. Your first question was, do you remember? Did I answer it?
Yes, I do. That was so very inspirational, Ms. Cooper. And I just wanted to add, just before I go on to the next question, that I think it's even important that we don't wait till there's a pandemic to even do these things. We should already, have these conversations. We should already know about what are the ways that we can, promote our community and get involved in our community, even as a business, as individuals. So I think that's just really amazing that you said that. And to my first question, it was, how did the ACP get involved to help people during the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, what's during the pandemic?
Right. So to your point, Lola, a lot of the work we were already doing. And so the pandemic kind of slowed up some of the things that we were working on. The first thing we did was make it real clear that we were going to be there to be a solution for our mayor, and that she wasn't in this alone, that we were going to be there. And so when the pandemic hit, our first response, as I talked about, was helping her with the homeless community, ensuring that community was not forgotten. So that was our very first action. The second thing that we did was take a look at evictions. And so we're still studying this. I told you guys before, I like the data. And so as we look at the data, And right now we've got this eviction moratorium, which we greatly appreciate. So landlords are having to, and they're sacrificing as well, right? We recognize that. But they're allowing people to stay in their homes, even though they can't pay today. And we know that's a sacrifice. That's helping. But based upon the data, we do see this eviction tsunami that's coming. And our projections say that we'll have upwards of 29,000 displaced families. So the goal right now is the city was fortunate that they actually received some CARES dollars, right? That would help them address this issue to try to keep people in their homes. The goal right now is to find a way, and we're supporting another organization who does this well. I've told you before, sometimes it's not good for us to lead it. Sometimes we just back other organizations. But to get out in front, start today working and partnering with landlords and saying, we're going to raise some dollars, we're going to give some dollars to help, because they need their money, they need to be able to stay in their own homes. And so we can do a little bit of that, seeing where they can give some of their residents some relief. But helping people stay in their homes continues to be a major concern of ours. That's going to be significant. If we have an influx of 29,000 families, the city's going to be a real challenge to manage and deal with that. And so it's worth the investment now to figure out how we avoid that as best we can. Not saying that we won't prevent it 100%, but we've got to be talking about it and working through it today before that moratorium gets lifted. So homelessness, eviction, and then we looked at food insecurity. So when the pandemic happened, and a lot of us, we probably don't think about this, but our faith-based communities, our churches, our synagogues, they are a key to food being distributed across the city. But when the pandemic happened, guess what? They all shut down. So we didn't even have a way of feeding people who were in need. And so we were able to work with the city and I was having daily calls at 9 a.m. with a network of food providers, whether it was the Atlanta Food Bank, to you name the organization. If you touch food and feeding the hungry, you're on my call. And we were talking about, okay, how do we make this happen? How do we bring this together? Fortunately for us, we had a restaurant that stood up and stepped up and said, look, I need to keep my workers working. If I can get the investment, right, the funding to keep that working, then I know I can feed this part of the city. And it became a regional thing, but we redirected and we went, this group went from feeding 800, and let me get this number right. I think we went from feeding like 600 people a day. When I say feeding them a day, that's more than one meal a day, right? To almost 1,300. And this is an infrastructure that we had to stand up almost instantaneously. And that's why I say it takes all of us, it takes a village, because ACP could not have done that on our own. But we knew if we called people together, they would respond to the call, and people showed up like you would not believe. Atlanta is such a giving city. And it wasn't just the citizens of Atlanta, it was a regional work. It was a regional work, right? But it opened my eyes to the value of the faith-based community in our region. They're so valuable. And so things like that. So we were responding, Lola, oftentimes in the moment, something would come up and we just have to just go grab it and just go work it with various nonprofits. But that's just a few examples. I'll stop there.
Wow. I mean, that's just amazing. Thank you, Ms. Cooper, for the work that you're doing and the work that your team is doing. I'm very sure many people right now are just like blessing you and praying for you. That's just amazing.
Yes, do pray for me. Do pray for me.
Yes. And earlier you talked about the civil unrest, and I just want to kind of switch the conversation to that and just allow you to just talk more on how the civil unrest following the death of George Floyd, how did that affect the work that you do at ACP?
Well, part of our strategy and part of an area that the mayor cares a lot about is safe communities, right? And so our mayor, night and day, working, trying to keep the city together and trying not to have the city destroyed, if I can just say it very candidly, right? And so recognize a couple of things that we recognize. One, we recognize that this unrest is happening at a time when people have been locked away in their homes. So we're all tired of being locked up and away from other people. And so the emotions were high. And so what she had to do, probably first and foremost, was just be visible to this, right? To continue to be in community. Unfortunately, it's probably how she, contracted COVID-19, if you all recall, she and her family, she and her husband more specifically. And so what we were trying to do was one, help her in terms of understanding any feedback we were getting from community, trying to understand her, how can we help, where can we help? We know and recognize today, and she recognizes that we spend a lot of time these days talking about public safety. Because we did, as a city, we found ourselves at two crises, right? We had a public health crisis and a public safety crisis. And so it was like, the perfect storm, all that coming together at a time when you really couldn't go and sit and talk to people eyeball to eyeball, right? And a lot of the community in our city, many of those folks are not connected like this. They don't do Zoom because they don't have the technology or the infrastructure, right, to be able to do that. So first and foremost, the mayor asked us, help me save as best we can Atlanta Public School APS, that school system. Because what we recognize, and as I talked with Dr. Herring, who's a fantastic new superintendent there, she had multiple challenges. One, again, a lot of the children there were from poor homes that didn't have the infrastructure, didn't have internet connection, didn't have devices, even if they had the connection at home. And so our first objective was to step in where we could there immediately. So Dr. Herring identified for us from 18 most vulnerable schools, and each one of our companies adopted a school. So what did that look like? That looked like partnering with the principal immediately to say, what are your needs? Didn't care what that was, but what you need. And so we were able to step in there. And now we're focused on learning loss, right? What are we going to do to ensure that our students from the APS system, that they are able to learn the things they missed out on this past year? Because there was not a whole lot of learning occurring, unfortunately. That was the first thing we did. So we thought first about our students and their future. Then the next thing the mayor asked us to take a look at was, again, it got to the eviction thing, what have you. But more importantly, what were we going to do to stop, right, I would say the violence and the emotion that was showing up on our streets. And so with that comes first and foremost a partnership with police officers, the police, policing and what that looks like in the community, a discussion with community about what's important to you in terms of policing. And so we have partnered with her to bring in an outside organization to help us look at that. And again, I will say to you, as she said to everybody, not all police officers are bad, right? We need the police, we need the police, right, in our communities. One of the things we learned as we were working on the West Side in our 15-year strategy, when you have police officers that live in community where they are part of community, the crime rate goes down. And how do we know that? So when we put together our 15-year strategy for the West Side, part of that was building police homes that were affordable, right? Because police officers don't make a whole lot of money, that were affordable, that can live in community. Well, we watched crime in the West Side community in Vine City and English Avenue, about three areas over there, dropped by over 30%. So we know it makes a difference when the police officers are in community and have relationship with community, when it's their community, right? And so we know that. So how can we do more of that? So fortunately, we have Pulte Group. Ryan Marshall is the CEO of a company called Pulte Group. Well, Pulte Group agreed to build 25 police officer homes on the West Side at their cost. That's the power of an ACP, right? We recognize too, like, look, people want jobs. They want you, and to have community, you gotta have restaurants, you gotta have all these things, right? These amenities that people want in their communities that we all enjoy in our own communities. So in stepped Dan Cathy, Chick-fil-A, and said, look, I'm gonna put a Chick-fil-A on the West Side. And he would tell you it's probably the most challenging Chick-fil-A he's ever had to deal with, right? Because anything happens, they run into Chick-fil-A. But that's okay, he's committed, he's staying. Since Dan has been there, we've had 2 other restaurants kind of open up, right? And so we recognize that working together, we can do these things. And so it was more about the mayor continuing to tell the story, right? Look, here's where we're trying to go in Atlanta. We know inequities exist. We know there are barriers to success for some communities, but we're trying to work it out. We're trying to fix it. So it's a time of You hate to ask for patience, but we're asking for patience, right? And calm. And because she had such a trusting relationship with community, um, for the most part, people listened. For the most part, people did go home, right? And so we were just trying to be as responsive as we could, but we first and foremost, it was about the children. It was about the children at APS and their ability to continue to learn.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tyson, why don't you go ahead and ask your questions?
Yeah, certainly. So based off all of your accomplishments as an executive, including the Black Enterprise Magazine's Most Powerful Executives in Corporate America in 2017, and many other awards that you've received, tell us, like, what are some of your core values and how are you able to apply them in your business?
Right. Great question, Tyson. I was hoping we'd get to talking about values today. So one of the things that's probably most important to me is integrity. Integrity actually becomes so important to me. And a lot of what we know about our own values, right, are things that we've learned in our homes as we've grown up. So let me just say that I am a pastor's kid. And so I'm a good one, guys. Okay. When people say PK, then you say, oh, they're bad children. I was a good time. My brother may be different, but I was good. Anyway, and so growing up in a home like that, you were taught to love people, right? Regardless of what they look like, how they come shaped or whatever. You know, my dad would say, and this is not to offend anyone, but we're all God's children, right? And so with that, you know, we were taught, though we were poor, you always had to work in community. So I guess that's why that came natural to me. So we were feeding the hungry. We had people living with us that may have lost their homes. And I'll tell you, growing up, I was a little bit selfish. So I didn't want to share my parents, but I quickly got over that because that was who they are. And so so number one for me is naturally this natural need to care for people, right? And so you talk about what I value. It is integrity and it is the respect and care for others. Those are probably the top two. Now, when people ask me, well, Shan, when you're building a team, what do you look for? Let me tell you, there are four things that I look for. Number one is integrity, right? That's just job number one. Number two is learning agility. That means you may not be able to do the job I'm asking you to do today, but have you demonstrated that you can learn something new and something different, right? Number three is good judgment. When I ran Lockheed Martin, I had 3 plants in 3 different states, couldn't be there every day. So I had to trust that I had put the right people in the role, that they could make good decisions. So good judgment. And then finally is ambition. And sometimes people think of ambition as being negative. I don't see it that way. I want the people who work with me to want my job, right? I should be trying to work myself out of a job. And that's how I did my career, right? In every role. And so those are the 4 things that I would look for when I was hiring and or promoting a new leader. And to me, those are the things that are really, really important.
Okay, it's really interesting that you brought that up because I'm currently taking a leadership and power class that's being taught by Dr. Goody, and we talked about leadership styles and behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And when you transition from Lockheed to the NP sector, like, did you have to adjust your leadership style, and if you did, like, in what ways?
Right. So Tyson, I would say I didn't adjust my leadership style. My style is one that's collaborative. I want to always have an environment where people can bring me bad news, right? You never want to be a leader where people are scared to tell you they're ugly. And I don't believe in shooting the messenger. And so my style didn't change. Let me tell you what changed for me though. When I worked at Lockheed Martin or even at WestRock, I could walk out of my office and have, thousands of people at my disposal, lots of resources to get things done, and all of that. Well, that doesn't happen in the nonprofit space, even here at ACP, right? And so my team today, you heard Lynn talk about, I led a team of over 6,000 employees. My team today is a team of 1, in addition to myself. I am fortunate, however, in that I have McKinsey Consulting as my workforce, so as I need more hands, arms, and legs, I'm able to access into that. But that was probably the biggest adjustment for me. Being able to walk out or say, gosh, I got to get this done, and then suddenly recognizing, well, Shan, you're going to do that, right? You know, so I may have to empty the garbage, I have to do it all, right? So that was the adjustment that I had to make. But my style and the way I lead did not change. Great question.
And I know we'll probably need to switch to many people having questions. But before we do that, I am just very curious. You serve in several boards. I'm just very curious, what are board members like and what are board meetings like?
Okay.
Like what's like the secret that we do not know about what happens in board meetings?
Right. So I will confess I'm on too many boards. I can't seem to say no. But so I'm changing that now. I'm currently on 4 corporate boards, and I think I'm down to 7 nonprofit boards. And so what's it like? And so first of all, when you're asked to serve on the nonprofit board, even on a corporate board, there's usually something very specific that they need you to bring to the table. Oftentimes, nonprofit organizations really need help with strategy, right? Well, that's a strength. That's something I can bring to the table. Or they need help with, human resources issues. Well, I've been a former, VP of Human Resources, so I can help there. Or they need someone who understands the technology space, so I can help there. So they're very specific about, as you're building a board, about what they need. The key to being successful on the board, however, is recognizing that that sometimes you can't always bring the corporate how-to into the nonprofit space. Because remember, back at corporate, you got all these resources to get things done. So sometimes you have to get creative about how you problem solve in the nonprofit space. But typically there are committees that you work on the board. There's the main board and there's little committees. There's typically an HR committee. There's typically, sometimes there's a capital campaign committee, and there are these different groups that get work done. I would say don't sign up for a board that you're not going to be all in on. When I'm on a board, I'm there to serve. I want to serve. I don't go just to have my name on the board. So I want to have that reputation that when Shan comes to your board, she comes there to work, because it is work. People are depending on you as the board to ensure that they keep their jobs, the employees keep their jobs, that you serve the mission that you're there to do. And so I serve on the board, one that I have a passion for. Probably the one that I probably serve on that they probably don't need me as much as on the zoo board, because I'm scared of animals. But what they needed there again was support and help around strategic planning, long-term strategic planning. And I was delighted to do that because the zoo was going through a major transformation, a major change. And so, but go and serve where it makes sense. Corporate boards are really, really important, but they also, you're actually running the business in essence. You're responsible, you're accountable, right, to shareholders. And so when you make decisions, it matters. And so you want to make sure you know the business, you understand the mission, you understand what you're trying to do. And so I've had the pleasure, I've been learning a lot. When I talk about learning agility and continuous learning, that has been my life. That's what I want to continue doing. So I'll just say, do serve, do give back, find a nonprofit board where you can add value and bring something to the table, but make certain that you're committed to it.
Thank you. Since time is fleeting very quickly, I wanted to get to some of the questions that were sent in by our audience. Okay. So here's a question. Does the ACP help out with the immigrants and international students based in Atlanta? And if so, how?
Actually, we have not gotten into that space. Typically what we do is the mayor sets the strategy, and then we figure out how we can help deliver on the mayor's strategy. As it relates to students, the only area that she's actually asked us to engage in was actually with APS. So we have not gotten touched that population. Okay, thank you. Another question. Ms. Cooper, thank you so much for honoring Oglethorpe with your presence this afternoon. Here's the question. What role do you see the university community, inclusive of faculty, students, alumni, and trustees,
playing in achieving many of the changes your leadership at ACP is striving for?
Oh my gosh, a major role, a major role. And that's why I love having the university presidents on the board. And that it's not just CEOs. So we could just be CEOs, right? But understand what universities bring to a community. One, they bring great research. So when I talked to you earlier about understanding who we were as Atlanta, a lot of that work, some of that work also came from McKinsey, but also came from the folks over at Georgia Tech and at Emory. We talk about health and public health. Again, we look to our universities. You know, Emory has the Rollins School of Public Health, and so whenever we're doing something, it's so valuable to have our presence around the table because they do bring a data-based, forward thinking. Because you know, we look to our universities to give us forethought around a lot of things. They bring that forward thinking to our discussions. When it talks about talent, oh my gosh, we want them right at the table with us because we want to ensure that they're developing talent that, again, adds value to our businesses, right? So it's a win-win for us, a multifaceted role there. But when I think about all the thought leadership that happens across the college campus, across many different disciplines, that's the value for us having university presidents on our board.
Okay, I think this is a question that's probably been on a lot of people's mind. Could you explain how you transitioned from your background in biology and religion to business, cities, and empowerment?
I sure can. So it's a confusing world. Do not let me be your role model for planning your career. So undergrad, I went to Emory undergrad and had all my life said I was going to be a doctor. So my senior year at Emory, I decided to, I took the MCAT, walking out of the MCAT, realized, look, I'm poor, I need a job, and I don't want to go back to Anniston, Alabama. And so my first job out of college was actually a bank teller. And so I did that, hated every moment of it, did not feel as challenged as I wanted to be. But the bank, I went to a bank and they promoted me. They made me a manager. So at 21 years old, if you can believe this, I was managing a major operation with no skills about people. And I was horrible at it. I should find those people and apologize today because I was just that bad. But it was a great teacher and a learning experience for me about what it really means to lead people. And so I decided then at that point, I've got an undergraduate degree. They've made me a manager in this bank. I'm certain this is not the career I'm going to follow. And so I went back and got my MBA. I called up, when I was an undergraduate at Emory, I had a work study job. And so I worked for the CFO at the business school. I called Greg up and said, hey, I want to come back and get my MBA, but I don't have any money. He said, you get accepted, I'll give you a job. The education's free. And from that, my job when I went back to get my MBA, I worked in the office of executive education, which gave me access to the business leaders here in Atlanta. Had a chance to sit through their training courses and learned a ton about business. And I got to know those folks. So even before I graduated with my MBA, I had a job offer from Lockheed. Lockheed at that time wasn't Lockheed Martin. Went to work for Lockheed in human resources. Lockheed merged with another company called Martin Marietta. My boss got shipped to DC. I said, I'm never going to leave. Had met a woman, was giving a speech, and someone was in the audience. She got to know her. She calls me up and says, if you're ever thinking about leaving, give me a call. I want to give you a job. I said, I'll call you later. I'm going to go run my own company. But me and my friends are going to start a consulting business. We did that for a while. Recognized that consulting wasn't for me because I didn't like traveling as much, and doing all the billable hours stuff. Sold my interest in that company. They made millions after I sold. That's okay. It's another story. I continue to have to work. But the wonderful thing is that I was always able to be in a position where I had a chance to meet people who would just call me about opportunities. I never interviewed for a job until the last one that I had at Lockheed Martin. And that was because so many people wanted that role that I had to compete for that. But I was fortunate enough to be connected with people who knew about opportunities and who would give me a chance to come in and do different things. And so when I left that consulting role and went back to work for Lockheed Martin, I stayed for a long time. And I stayed there because it was an opportunity for me to grow and still do different things. And I got a chance to, after being in HR for 10 years, I got a chance to run an operation, a very important operation to the company. And that was really eye-opening for me, the best job I ever had. I said I was going to retire, went to help a friend at WestRock, then tried to retire, and then got called about this role, said no to this nonprofit role 3 times until they sent me the data. And once I saw the data, then I had to come back. So I won't be in this job forever, but while I'm here, I hope to make a big impact. And so I would just say, if you had said to me while I was in college, well, Shan, you're going to go off and, build military aircraft and weapons, and I would say you've lost your mind, right? There's no way I could ever do that. Or if you had said, Shan, you're going to lead a nonprofit one day, I would have said you've lost your mind. There's no way I'm ever going to do that. So I would just encourage our students to be open to new and different. And that's why that learning agility becomes important. Don't shy away from things that you say, I don't have the skill to do today. As long as you got the learning agility, you can learn how to do it. Trust me, I didn't know anything about building military aircraft and weapon systems coming out of human resources, but I was determined to learn the job, and I learned, and I did do that. So that's a long answer, Lynn, I'm sorry.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. We are fortunate to be joined by the president of Oglethorpe, Dr. Nick Ladany, who would like to enter and say a few words at the end here.
I think I'm in here. Is this right? You can see me now?
Yes.
All right, very good. Welcome. Thank you so much, Shan. I want to first say that I too was a bank teller, so I can appreciate, I was not a very good one either. I worked at one point for the oldest savings and loan in the country, was out of Washington, D.C., where I grew up. And I think I was 16, and they used to give me the bags of cash and checks to carry to the bank, which was about 10 blocks away. And I think the argument was it was cheaper to send a 16-year-old who didn't really look like he was gonna had anything, he was up to anything, but then hire a security person. So those were the good old days. But I didn't enjoy it either. But thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today and answer the questions that our students have about ACP and the work and the inspiring work that you're doing. Really, it's quite extraordinary. And I was disappointed to hear that you've started to say no about nonprofit boards, but I actually didn't fully hear that. So I'm gonna delay on that one. But thank you so much for all the work you do and your leadership in the community. I want to say a couple things about Oglethorpe. Just first of all, thank you to the students. What extraordinary students and the questions they asked. And I just want to commend them for really doing an outstanding job. And, one of the reasons I came here was, I would say the #1 core value we have at Oglethorpe is our strong commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's really the lens through which we make our best decisions, and I make my best decisions. So you said something early on, something to the effect of, and I just want to maybe change your quote a little if I didn't get it right, but something like DEI is good for business in the public and private sectors, and it's also good business at Oglethorpe. So I just think it's not an either or, it's the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. And we've got to integrate DEI. And I got to tell you, higher ed has done a horrible job, in my opinion, around integrating DEI into the work that we do. And I think Oglethorpe we want to be a leader in being able to use DEI as our lens. And so the words you said certainly mean a lot and resonate to us. And the last thing I want to say is just I want to echo Dr. Goody's thanking the Rikard family for their steadfast support of the Rikard Lecture Series. We really are pleased to bring a wide range of accomplished business speakers to engage with our students, and we're deeply grateful for that. And Shan, you are certainly one of our deeply accomplished business speakers and value what you were able to bring to us today. So thank you. And I will pop this back over to Lynn, right?
Yes, that's fine.
We're getting used to Zoom.
That's right.
One day I'll get good at it.
One day we all will, but hopefully not. We'll be back to face to face. Again, Shan, thank you so much for coming. And I can say the testament to how well you've done is I've had several students message me and say, hey, is she taking interns next semester? You've done a fine job of recruiting our students.
Absolutely. And so if there are what I like to do though, what I try to do is when we can, is if I've got projects where I can have students work on them, be happy to have some of your students come hang out with us at ACP, and I have a fun project for the mayor. So I try to make that available to all of our universities. So just keep that in mind, Lynn.
Well, we will for sure. Thank you. So again, thank you to our students. Of course, they did an awesome job. And thank you, Shan, for coming. It's been a great experience. I've learned so much about the city of Atlanta. And we thank you for providing us this information, for giving us your time. And based on what you said, I am sure glad you unretired, because the city of Atlanta is better because of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. Take good care. Success to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.